Now here's Brian with today's Real Estate Show.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I'm, of course, your host, Brian Beatty. Gosh, 14 years I've been on this program helping folks better understand the real estate market and educating you on the real estate process, whether you want to buy a home, sell a home, invest in real estate. Maybe you have a home you'd like to property manage. Maybe if you're thinking about selling real estate. This is the show where I inform consumers about the state of the real estate market and then educate them on the process so that when it comes time for them to buy or sell a home, they're an informed consumer. They know what to do. They know the right questions to ask and how to align themselves successfully to make the best deal possible. So that's what this show is all about. Today, I want to talk about what I think is going to happen this fall. I'm going to do some predictions for the fall real estate market. I'm going to hit you with some stats, some of which are not going to look very good. So brace yourselves for that. We're going to talk about that and just kind of the state of the market right now. What is causing homes to sell? How are buyers' feelings about things like new choices with high interest rates impacting the market? I want to talk a little bit, too, about what I'm kind of referring to as the downsizing dilemma. You know, we have a large portion of our population here in Charleston that has owned their home for 10, 20 plus years. It's at the point in time where maintenance is becoming a challenge. And they're thinking about downsizing and simplifying. They've made a ton of money in the form of equity over the past several years, and they're trying to figure out the next step. So I want to kind of go through that process a little bit and touch on a few other points here today in this next hour. Now, if you want to reach out to me, you're thinking of maybe buying a home, selling a home, you'd just like to have kind of a consultation of sorts, speak your mind, figure out what the appropriate next step is. We'd love the opportunity to earn your business. We've sold about 1,500 homes to the tune of about $1 billion here locally on my real estate team. So I'd love to help you. You can call or text me personally. It'll come straight to me. My number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. And also check out our YouTube stuff. You know, we take all these radio shows and I video myself while I'm here jabbering away, and then we put it online for you to see and watch. So if you want to connect a face with the voice, then YouTube is where to find us. But let's get into it. Let's talk about kind of where we are as a market right now. So let me hit you first with three pretty incredible stats. And this is where I had mentioned earlier that they don't look very good. We'll add a little context to this. But if we look at, you know, we track a lot of things on my real estate team, and obviously for the purpose of providing you with expert guidance on this radio show, right? There's no way I would be here for 14 years if I wouldn't have at this point been considered an expert in this specific market, in this specific field. It's just something that I've tracked daily for 2 decades. Here's what I found when I was doing my own research. I haven't seen anybody else report on this yet, but if you look at the number of showings every property that goes on the market for sale is supposed to get, right? That is a number that we track. And when I sit down with folks and we're talking about putting their home on the market for sale, that's a number that we hone in on. We say, hey, you know, the average number of showings in your area, in your price range over the past, 30, 60, 90 days has been XYZ, right? These are the targets that we want to shoot for. It essentially tells us whether we are on track or not. If we're getting as many or more than the average number of listings in your area are getting in the form of showings, then we're in a good spot. You know, we're in what we call the strike zone, so to speak. Whereas, of course, if we're getting significantly less than the average, well, then maybe that prompts us to have a discussion about repositioning the home in some way, shape, or form. When I look at the number of showings we've gotten over the past 3 months, it's not pretty. If I look at the third quarter of this year, on average, we were getting 11.4 showings per listing over that 90-day period. That is the lowest it has been since the third quarter of 2012, when we had 10.8. So for 13 years, we've done better than that. I also look at something like how long is it taking a house to sell? The median days on market in September was the worst September we've had since 2014. Lastly, I look at, all right, well, if they're staying on the market for a while, how much are they actually getting in relation to their asking price, right? Now, and this statistic that I'm about to share is the sales price that somebody gets in relation to their current asking price. It doesn't have anything to do with their original asking price. We'll get to that stat a little bit later on. But 97.1% is what we got in September. It was the worst September we've had since 2014. So we have some unfortunate stats that are obviously helping buyers, right? We can see that the demand is waning. And while these sales and stats aren't as impressive as we have seen or have gotten used to over the past several years, at the end of the day, the market is still moving, and I'll get to that in a minute. But what I think is really driving the issue here is the affordability gap, right? And you think about it this way, okay? The Charleston metro area's median income is $85,000 a year. The median sales price in our market is $424,000. So if you earn $85,000 a year and you're going to put down 20% and you have great credit and you have no recurring debt, meaning you don't have a car payment, you don't have student loans, you have no recurring debt obligations. In other words, you're a perfect borrower with 20% down. You can afford a $290,000 house. If you're making $85,000 a year, you have your 20% saved up and you have no debt. A $290,000 property. Well, right now, there's about 4,500 properties available for sale. If you want to buy a house, only 3% of our total inventory is at or below $290,000. And guess what? A vast majority of them are not livable. They need significant work. Now, if you're looking at a condo or a townhouse, that opens up the inventory a little bit. Now you have 8.5% of the total, but literally half of the people, because, we're looking at a median income, right? Median income is the halfway mark. That means half of the people are in a $290,000 or less market, of which there is hardly anything available for sale because prices have gone up so much. So how much do you need to make in order to afford the median priced home of $424,000? Well, you need to make $115,000 a year. And again, you have to have 20% down and you have to have no debt, right? There are only 23% of our inventory is available at or below $424,000, right? So half of the listings are below, or half the listings available below that number is $475,000 is the halfway mark in our market right now. If you look at everything for sale, the median listing price is $475,000. Well, to be in the top 20% of income earners in the Charleston metro area, you have to make $116,000 a year. In other words, all this put together, 80% of the people in this market based on income are competing for about a third of the available inventory. This is why prices are so sticky, right? They haven't really come down, even though we have plenty of stats that would justify them coming down. They're holding firm right now, but there's the writing's on the wall, right? So let's just think about this for a moment from both perspectives. If you're a seller, you don't want to have to feel like you're giving your home away just to sell it, right? Their savings, their net worth is more than likely tied to the home that they're trying to sell. So every dollar counts, every decision counts. They're in a position where they now have to compete with people. You have to strategically promote the property. You're competing with other folks. You're either helping other people sell or they're helping you sell based on how you're positioned. And at the end of the day, right now in this market, mistakes are more costly than they have been in the past several years. So it's obvious that sellers are frustrated. They're sitting on the market for longer than they thought. They're getting less than they thought they would. And in most instances, they're not getting direction. The relationship that agents and sellers have can be a tumultuous one if the seller feels like the agent's not doing enough to promote the property and earn their commission. And I know because we're having more and more conversations with folks that tried selling and are clearly frustrated because they felt like they were told one thing but got another, right? That's why accountability with your agreement with your real estate agent is so important, right? On the buyer side, a few success stories of folks you hear that bought something for 20% off doesn't necessarily mean that the market has just come down 20% and that everyone's going to be willing to entertain an offer below 20%. or 20% off of their current asking price. It all has to do with what the house is ultimately worth, right? Someone can ask whatever they want for their house. If it's worth $500,000 and they're asking $475,000, that would be a good deal. But if it's worth $500,000 and they're asking $575,000, we'll start up here, and if it doesn't work, then we'll just reduce the price. And obviously that creates its own can of worms that we can get into a little bit later on. But buyers are clearly hesitant right now to pay full value because there are stats that suggest that prices are softening. Not just about to start softening, they're already softening in some areas. And I think that more options for them can create a lack of urgency. Well, we'll just see what else hits the market because we're not thrilled with what's available right now. At the end of the day, a lot of buyers are willing to pay top dollar for property if two things happen. Either number one, the property is just a really unique property, right? It's in great condition. It's been renovated well. The seller made smart choices. It looks great. It's priced well. It's just a well-priced, well-marketed home. At the end of the day, 3 out of every 10 homes that are being sold in America right now are still selling for above asking price. So there's still plenty of opportunity in the market for a seller. But if you're just going to go and get lost in the pack and your home doesn't have any differentiating features, right? If it's just an average home that's averagely priced, it's going to take some time. There's going to have to be some patience involved there. Or you're just going to have to hope to get a little lucky and find the person that likes something about that house more than the other ones that are priced just the same, essentially. I think the other way that homes are, either they're priced really well, right? Or there's something really unique about the property. I think the ones that are just kind of lost in a sea of other similar listings are the ones that are feeling the challenge right now. They're sitting on the market. They're wondering what needs to happen in order to move the house. So at the end of the day, the price leaders are the ones that are getting the attention. And what will happen over time is that more and more people will realize that they'll start using that price cutting strategy of, this person's listed at $500. I'm going to list at $495. Well, then they go down to $489. It's the opposite effect of what we've seen for years in our market, where I refer to it as leapfrog pricing, right? Someone lists for $400, the next seller puts it on for $425, then $439, and prices just are gradually going up because the market can absorb it. Well, right now the market is rejecting properties that are priced, in their opinion, above fair market value. They're not even giving them the time of day with a showing, which is why a lot of folks that are sitting on the market right now are just not getting showings. Buyers are sitting around being patient, waiting for sellers to adjust their price and for that home to become more attractive to then give them the time of day. And that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes for a seller. So when I come back, we're going to talk more about really what I think is going to happen, right? We'll talk about mortgage rates, what I think will kind of unlock the market, so to speak, and then a few more trends for you to be aware of so that you can incorporate that into your strategy. So stick around. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show right here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. Remember, if you want to reach out to me, have a conversation about real estate, whether it's just something I can help you with, a simple question, or to help strategize and potentially work together. My number, you can call or text 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check out our website, listingsincharleston.com. So I want to give you some predictions for what I think is going to happen in the fall market this year, given the understanding that there's a lot of mixed messaging in our market right now. I just read some stats last segment about the fact that we've had we had the worst September we've had in a long time, well over a decade, for things like showings and how long it's taking a home to sell and how much money folks are getting in relation to their asking price. I didn't even go over the stat for how much they got off of their original asking price, because we're seeing more and more often and more substantially that homes are selling for a good amount less than their original asking price. So there's this huge difference between homes that are priced well that are selling and then ones that there's just either a lack of guidance on where to appropriately price the home, or it's just that's what the seller wanted to do, whether or not they were made aware of the potential consequences of that, who knows? But obviously there are those that are just choosing to overprice the property as a strategy that then over time slowly bring the cost of the house down, when in reality in most instances, it shoots them in the foot and they end up selling for less and making less money. And for those of you that listen to the show, you know that we've hired a statistician to literally prove that point. And so at some point here in the next little bit, we'll get the third quarter stats from that company, and I'll provide you with some more insight into that. But let's maybe anchor some expectations first about this fall market with a few forecasts. The first being mortgage rates, right? Fannie Mae, as an example, their research team is saying that rates are going to end up in the low sixes and maybe under 6 by 2026. So low sixes by the end of the year, will drop down hopefully below 6% by the end of 2026. Obviously, it implies some level of relief, but certainly not at the pace that we want, nor do we expect in any way, shape, or form for interest rates to plunge, right? I don't think anything's going to move quickly. But, there are a bunch of studies out there that have essentially, or surveys rather, that have asked folks what interest rate really they feel they would need to get in order to kind of unlock the market and revive sales to an extent. And a lot of folks are saying 5.5%, which is really not that far from where we are now. And so it's, of course, possible that we're there sooner than the end of the year next year. But, the question is what's going to happen between now and the end of next year. I think that another thing that's important to look at is prices and seller behavior. Right? There are a lot of different data points out there that show that price growth is decelerating, right? The rate at which properties are appreciating is significantly slowed and in some cases has stopped. And of course, that's going to depend on the area and the price range and how saturated they are. I'll tell you as an example, like the $400,000 house in Somerville, that's a few years old, that's competing with a massive amount of new construction, is a tough sale right now because a buyer can go to a builder and get a 2 or 3% interest rate because those builders own those mortgage companies. That's a tough thing to negotiate against when you're a seller and you just can't offer that level of monthly payment savings, right? So how do you strategically sell your home without giving away the farm, right? There are ways of doing it, but that's a challenge. And so many sellers are still acting as if it's 2021 and they're outpacing their competition with their asking price when in reality, pricing trajectory is not following that pace anymore, right? We had a nice little dip in interest rates, by the way, in last month. And then the first few days of October, they actually inched back up a little bit, which is why rates are fluid, right? Obviously, the fact that the government shut down is not helping in any way, shape, or form. But at the end of the day, what's going to happen with prices, right? People are suggesting that there will be a slight dip in value by, say, summer of next year, 1% to 2%, right? So, and those are national projections, right? What's happening here in Charleston is slightly different. What I can say is that, we've got different pockets of properties and property types and price ranges that make it challenging, honestly, to just say, hey, here's what's happening in Charleston in general, because we've got everything from manufactured housing to $20 million homes on the beach. So it's a little unfair to just say, as a market, here's what's going to happen. But I think in the vast majority of areas and price ranges, prices for the most part are flat. I really don't see any appreciation, meaningful appreciation occurring, maybe 1 or 2%. Because of things like the affordability gap that I'd mentioned and kind of dove into a little earlier on in the show. So I think the bottom line for fall is to expect a cool, negotiation-friendly market. People are going to have to be open-minded to that. So if you're a buyer, again, I would expect some fairly slim pickings over between now and the end of the year. And just as a quick side note, right? So we always talk about the fact that inventory kind of dries up between now and the end of the year. I want to talk a little bit about timing the market. And so I'm just giving myself like an auditory reminder to talk about timing of the market. But there's some interesting things that sellers can do to take advantage of that. I'm reminding myself to come back to that. I think another thing for buyers right now, in addition to just understanding that there's going to be Not as many options, of course, as there are in the beginning of the year and in the spring. There are people that have been on the market for quite a while, or that might have recently taken their home off the market, that still want to sell it. They're just tired of keeping their house show ready. I mean, it can be emotionally and physically draining on a seller that sits on the market for a few months and constantly keeps their home as clean as it can possibly be. I mean, some folks live that way, some do not. And believe me, I've been in, 10,000 plus homes at least. I can tell you the majority do not. Just personal experience. But I would say the last thing for sellers to really think about for this fall is to leverage concessions. Get sellers to pay down your interest rate. Get them to pay your closing costs. I mean, you always want to go after closing costs or an interest rate buy down rather than just negotiating off of the purchase price. And here's why: because concessions are a dollar for dollar saving. Meaning, let's say you're going to go and you're going to buy a $100,000 house, right? And you've got your 20% down, but then you also need like $5,000 for closing costs, right? Every $100,000 that you finance is about $650 a month in mortgage payments. So let's say you're buying a $500,000 house. Does it make more sense to negotiate $20,000 off of the purchase price or get a $20,000 concession? Well, if you negotiate $20,000 off of the purchase price, all that means is you have saved about $130 a month, right? Whereas if you get a $20,000 savings that you don't have to bring to the table in the form of cash, how long is it going to take you to recoup that cash differential, right? How long do you need to stay in the home for that to be your break-even point? Well, if you've gotten $130 a month savings, that means that you're going to have to be in that home for like 13, 14 years in order to have that $20,000 savings be the same. And most folks don't live in their home for that long. They sell in 5 to 7 years. So it's better to take the concession. So obviously, as a buyer, you want to try and take advantage of the frustration of the seller in this market. It's not an easy market to sell in. You just have to have strategy. You have to have a game plan. You have to have customized marketing. We talk a lot about this on this program, about sellers and how they can differentiate themselves from the pack. And then I think you also need to be inspection mindful. I think a lot of buyers are getting good deals on repairs, right? Again, concessions, sellers being more open-minded to fixing things rather than saying, there's so many other buyers out there that will buy my house. I don't feel like doing anything to it. And a few years ago, that would have been the advice we would have given because it was true. Now things are different. So sellers, it's not necessarily that. How do I say this? When sellers hire real estate agents, some of them do a really good job of just being gregarious and kind of winning them over with their personality and charm. And maybe that is tied to the level of customer service that particular seller expects. But when the rubber meets the road, right? When the property goes on the market and the performance of the listing is the only thing that really matters, right? Are you getting showings? Are you getting offers? Are you going to sell the house or not? That's really what the seller wants, right? That's what they're most interested in. Not what you did this past weekend or the weather or anything other than I hired you to sell my house. What has been done? And if what is being done is not working, what's the game plan moving forward to achieve results, right? Again, having accountability in those agreements, in those conversations as expectations is incredibly important. I think also as a seller, it's really important to do what I call win the first 2 weeks, right? Like when we go on the market, we want all eyes on us. And there are certain strategies that we employ on my team behind the scenes to get the home ready, to get the marketing ready, to build a pipeline of interested people so that when it hits the market, we have immediate showing requests, right? Of all the fancy marketing we do, like I could bore you guys with AI-driven behavioral techniques that promote your property to people based on demographics and geographics and online behaviors and blah, 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 and it probably go in one ear and out the other. But I think most people can agree that if they're interested in buying a house and they go and they schedule a showing, but they have to wait for somebody to leave because someone else is taking a look at it, And then after they're kind of done touring the property, they see that someone else is waiting in the driveway to go and see it. Guess what that creates? Urgency. It creates a fear of loss. And at a basic level, that's what we need to create with our marketing. But if you don't have a game plan, if you don't have a true customized plan for the property that you're selling, then you're just hoping to get lucky, because really all you're doing is putting it in the MLS and waiting for other agents with clients to show your house. And as a seller in this market, you need tools, you need strategy, you need processes, tried and true, not just a pricing tool, right? Where, oh, if we don't sell in 30 days, well, let's just reduce the price. At some point, we'll get to a price where somebody wants to buy it, right? No, do yourself a favor and interview the agents that really are marketing experts that understand how to position and sell properties at attractive prices in a challenging market. Obviously, with someone like me that's been selling real estate for 20 years and has seen every type of market there is, my skill set's a little different. And I think that's one thing that has caused us to just kind of get really, I mean, we're kind of on fire as a team right now. I'm loving everything that we're doing as a team. We're helping a lot of folks. And so if you're also thinking of selling your home, maybe buying another, maybe you have a property you'd like for us to take over from a property management perspective. We're going to talk about that a little bit as well. But I invite you to give us a call. We're happy to help in any way we can, whether it's just providing you with, a contractor referral, or if it's, earning your business. We'd love the opportunity. My number, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check out our website, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. I always like to take a moment and just thank you. I really do appreciate those of you that have listened to this show for so long. And it's been a pleasure to be on this program for, the past 14 years. And so just thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the advice to heart. It really is my pleasure to come on this show and just kind of tell you guys like it is, not have to really sugarcoat anything. I'm a pretty direct person as it is already, but this show is a nice platform for me to help you guys separate fact from fiction, because the real estate market is really challenging, in my opinion, to figure out, right? There's too much mixed messaging out there, and there are too many people that are offering guidance that are really shrouded by their want or their need for a commission and personal gain, whether it's subscribers or views or, connections, whatever it is. This goal for this show is very simple: educate and inform, right? And maybe entertain a little bit along the way. So anyways, thank you. I want to switch gears. I want to talk about, a lot of the folks that I end up working with personally are folks that are kind of in their golden years, that they're at or very close to retirement age. They own essentially the biggest, nicest, most expensive home that they've owned in their lifetime, and now they're trying to figure out the next step. And in most instances, it's how do we downsize? How do we simplify, right? The house no longer fits our needs, or, look, we just don't need a house this size. We'd rather use the equity that we've built for other things. And so I think that's probably a lot of folks that are listening right now. And so this segment is kind of for you. The first thing is, why do people downsize? And the most obvious one is maintenance, right? The gutters, the roof, the lawn, all of it, it's just becoming too much. And if I outsource it, then it's an expense that I really would just prefer not to have to incur right now. And the second is mobility or safety, right? Stairs are a little different when you're 80 years old as compared to when you're 40 years old. And we've had too many clients, unfortunately, over the past 6 months that we've began working with that have had things like they've fallen down the stairs and broken a leg or a hip. And it's at that age, it's really tough to recover from stuff like that. But the third is, lifestyle. They want to travel. They want to spend more time with kids and grandkids. Their priorities have changed. They don't have to be at their 9 to 5 anymore. They want to be able to lock the door and walk away for a while. And then I think the fourth is just financial security. They want to do something with all of this equity that they've built. They want to put that to work in different ways, whether it's supplementing their retirement or helping family, paying down debt, whatever it might be, right? Financial simplification. On the flip side, though, they're going to go from selling a home in a more than likely higher end price point and then go and compete for a home in a more competitive environment. Because obviously the higher in price you go for real estate, the less options there are, just because there aren't that many people that can afford homes in the $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 million price range. Even though you'd be surprised at the amount of them that have sold this year and in the years past. We do have a lot of money that comes to Charleston, by the way. But if you're thinking about downsizing, what you really need is you need a plan, right? We really have to take some time and figure out the timing of everything, right? Because the timing can feel very tricky. Do you sell first? Do you buy first? What if you can't find the right home in the time that you've designated because you've put your home on the market? There are a lot of questions there. And that's where a lot of my time is spent when I sit down with folks and we talk about the process, because that is a very good logistical question. And there is no one size fits all answer to it. What we do is we go through all the options that exist. Most of the folks understand something like selling their home and buying another. But there are plenty of other options that exist, like a home purchase contingency, as an example. We've talked about that on this program. Basically, you list your home for sale. Somebody comes along and says, I would really like to buy it. And you have the ability to say, hey, I'll sell it to you, but I need 30 days or 6 weeks or whatever the number is, the amount of time is that you can get that other party to agree to. But hey, I need to go and secure a replacement property. I need time to go and shop for a new home. If I can find one, put it under contract, get through my inspections, then yes, I will honor my sales agreement with you. But if I can't find something suitable to replace, then I don't want to be homeless. So I have the right to cancel the contract, right? That's an example of being creative, something that when you work with an experienced agent, they can walk you through step by step. So logistically, we have to come up with some possibilities, right? Some solutions to how do we get from point A to point B. And that's going to depend on, your financial stability, your propensity for risk, all of those things. And then, of course, there's just there's the emotional side of it, right? Selling the family is a big deal, right? Maybe it's the family trying to sell you on the reason why this is a good idea. We see it about 50-50. But either way, it's years of your life that you've spent in this home. There's a lot that goes into understanding the process, but then there's also just the emotional toll of leaving those memories behind to create new ones. Now, what I will say is that there's, I think, some good news. Obviously, if you've owned your home for years and years, you have a ton of equity. You probably also have a really good payment on your house because hopefully you refinanced when the getting was good and you're at or below a 3% interest rate. But more than likely, what's going to happen is a lot of the folks that downsize in this market, let's say that they bought a home in Sneed Farm 20 years ago in Mount Pleasant. I mean, look at what has happened in that neighborhood. You have multi-million-dollar sales in Sneed Farm now, whereas, like 10 years ago, you wouldn't have thought that would be the case. So you've got all these different pockets of real estate in the Charleston area that have just exploded with appreciation. And a lot of those folks in no way, shape, or form could afford to buy the home they live in at today's prices and today's interest rates. They've benefited massively from the appreciation that we've seen as everybody kind of moved to the Charleston area and prices skyrocketed during COVID. So selling the home isn't as much of a challenge as identifying the appropriate replacement property. And so that's why I think it makes sense to not put the cart before the horse, right? Let's go out and let's identify the areas that you want to move to. Let's have discussions about maybe some areas that have something like smaller kind of luxury-based communities that are kind of popping up all along the Charleston area that aren't being well advertised, honestly. But there are some great opportunities that exist for folks that are thinking of downsizing, simplifying. And that's really the challenge is, if we're moving from 4,000, 5,000 square feet, most folks have a tough time justifying moving into 1,500 square feet, right? So that also is part of the process is just talking through how you're going to use the space. How much really do you need? Because you don't want to you don't want to make the wrong decision on that, obviously. So I think just talking with somebody through that process is incredibly important. If your home feels too big, too expensive, or just too much to manage, right? downsizing might be the thing that makes the most sense. So if you'd like to learn more, you're welcome to call or text me. My number is 843-800-0065. Like I mentioned, I'd say the majority of folks that I work with personally right now are in this scenario. And so it's not just the logistics of getting from point A to point B. It's what about repairs? What about decluttering? You know, I've got a house full of stuff that I don't know what to do with. So maybe that's an estate sale company that we connect you with. A lot of moving parts, but give us a call. We'll walk you through it, answer any questions you might have. My number, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. And then just lastly, really quickly, if you want to just send me an email, you prefer to do it that way, my email address is Brian, that's Brian with an I, at brianbeattyteam.com. So I remembered from just a little bit ago that I'd left myself a note as I was talking, ironically, to talk about timing a market, because that's really what a lot of folks want to know right now is, when does it make sense? I want to move, but when should I move? When's the right time? How do I analyze that? How do I interpret that? And I've had some great conversations recently that revolved around this specific topic. So I'm going to tell you guys kind of what I tell them and how I help people through that decision-making process, right? Because it's probably the most important thing for those that don't have to move, right? If you have to move, if there's some sort of thing that's pressing, that's urgent, right? You have a legitimate reason to sell now, then, you know, there's strategies that you create around that. But for the folks that don't have to sell this exact moment, right? There's nothing pushing them out the door. They are not a, what I would call, quote unquote, motivated seller. Then the question becomes, well, when should I enter the market to give myself the best chance to sell for the most money? So when I look at timing a market for an individual, I have to look at three different things. The first is just the overall seasonality of the market. What can we expect this time of year if we hit the market, right? If we're listing right now, if we're listing next month, yes, we know that there are less options available historically. And because there are less options available, we also see demand come down a little bit. But believe me, there are plenty of people out there that are in a position where if they see the right house hit the market, just like you being not necessarily motivated to sell immediately, they're not motivated to buy immediately. But if the right thing hits the market, they'll buy it. So, I mean, yes, we see less new homes hit the market around this time of year, and they do take a little longer to sell, but the ones that are priced well, that are marketed well, I'm telling you, they really separate from the pack, and they become kind of this beacon that people are drawn to. It's an interesting thing that happens this time of year. So, yes, inventory is less, but we look at the seasonality of the market, right? What can we expect this time of year in this area, in this price range when we go on the market for sale? The second is the overall market trajectory, right? Yes, the market is susceptible to seasonal adjustments, but what's the overall direction of the market? Are we improving, right? Are prices going up like they have been for the past several years, really since 2014, but obviously at a bigger scale during COVID? Are they flat, which is kind of where we are right now? Or are they going down, which in some instances is the case in some areas of our market? So we have to apply that as well. If we wait, are we in a better position this time next year or in the spring of next year? We can kind of overlay the two and we can look at the seasonality and then the overall trajectory. And then the third thing I look at is, well, if we were to go on the market right now, what do recent sales look like? What does the competition look like currently? Who are we competing against? If, as an example, several people, let's say in the past 3 months, you've had 5 sales that you would consider to be comparable sales, and 3 out of the 5 of them were from motivated sellers that didn't have the luxury of just selling whenever they felt like selling. They needed to move, and they priced their home accordingly. Or let's say that, like we're starting to see right now, someone had to do a short sale in order to sell because they can't afford to sell it and bring money to the table. They don't have the money to be able to pay to sell their house. So they have to get their bank to participate in that. We're starting to see that happen. It's all over the place in Florida right now. But what does the current comp environment look like? If you're waiting, right? Because you're trying to time the market because you truly believe that it would be better to wait until spring. But then you have two people in your neighborhood that are on the same street as you that, didn't necessarily care to get top dollar. They wanted to sell quickly. That actually does impact you. Those become comparable sales that then justifies the buyer's perception of what the market will pay for a home like yours. So we look at the current comp environment to look for opportunity, right? Are there very few homes for sale? Are the sales that have occurred in line with what we believe value to be? Or are people having to make some pretty aggressive price cuts or offer considerable amounts of concessions in order to sell the house? And do we anticipate it being better a few months down the road? Or is the problem just going to get worse between now and, say, spring of next year because the market is honestly not on a great trajectory from a seller's perspective? We have to look at all of that, right? And that's part of why I think that those that are maybe thinking of selling in the next few months or maybe this time next year or at some point next year, go ahead and get some information together. Understand what your home is worth. Understand how much equity you have in your home, meaning if you were to sell it, what are the expenses of the sale and how much money are you actually going to walk away with after you pay off your mortgage if you have one, right? How much cash do you have in your house? And then what do opportunities look like right now? If you were to rent your home as an example, let's say you decided to keep your home as an investment property, what would your cash flow look like because you've got a great interest rate and you want to hold on to that interest rate and maybe turn your home into an investment property, right? All of these things we can analyze for you and provide as here are some different paths to take, but it starts with having the information. So if we can help you with that, feel free to give us a call. My direct number, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check out our website, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Thanks for listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Y'all enjoy your weekend.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065.